On July 1, 2002, 71 people were killed when a Bal Bashkirian Airlines passenger plane and a DHL cargo plane collided in midair over Überlingen, Germany. On the night of July 1, 2002, Bal Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937, a Tupolev Tu-154, en route from Moscow to Barcelona, and a cargo plane belonging to DHL collided in German airspace. 71 people lost their lives in the accident. Peter Nielsen, an air traffic controller working for SkyGuide, which controls the Swiss airspace, was managing the airspace alone, working at two workstations at the same time. The pilots of Flight 611, a cargo flight, were flying at an altitude of 32,000 feet and wanted to climb to 36,000 feet in order to save fuel, and asked Nielsen for permission to climb. Nielsen gave permission for Flight 611 to climb. Flight 611 climbed to 36,000 feet after this permission. Meanwhile, Flight 2937 from Moscow to Barcelona also informed Nielsen that it was flying at 36,000 feet when it entered Swiss airspace. But Nielsen could not assign different altitudes to the two planes. This meant that both flights were now at the same altitude and on overlapping routes. Less than a minute before the collision, Nielsen recognized the danger and contacted the pilots of Flight 2937. Nielsen instructed the pilots of Flight 2937 to descend to a flight level of 35,000 feet to avoid a collision. Seconds after the pilots of Flight 2937 started to implement this instruction, the TCA system on both aircraft instructed Flight 2937 to ascend and Flight 611 to descend. The pilots of Flight 611 carried out the instruction they received from the TCAS system and started to descend. The pilots of Flight 2937, on the other hand, did not follow the ascent instruction of the TCA system, but the descent instruction they received from the ATC, and so both planes started descending. As a result, two planes following the same instruction collided at an altitude of thousands of feet. If the pilots of both flights had followed the TCA's instructions, the collision would not have occurred. SkyGuide, after initially blaming the Russian pilots of Flight 2937 for the accident, accepted full responsibility, asked for forgiveness from the relatives of the deceased, and agreed to pay compensation. After the crash, air traffic controller Nielsen was murdered by one of the relatives of the dead passengers. Russian architect Vitaly Kaloyev held Peter Nielsen personally responsible for the deaths of his wife and two children on Flight 2937. Kaloyev stabbed Nielsen to death at his home near Zurich on February 24, 2004, while Nielsen's wife and three children were at home. After this incident, it was decided that whatever instructions received from the ATC, if they contradicted the instructions of the TCAS system, the instructions of the TCAS system would be followed.